My name is Margaret, and I'm 65 years old. For years, I thought I was supporting my daughter and granddaughter with my $4,000 monthly pension. Then I discovered she was secretly funneling that money to her lavish mother-in-law for spa treatments and designer bags. So I didn't argue, I didn't yell. I gathered my evidence, presented them with an ultimatum that shattered their world, and legally took custody of my granddaughter. It's a long story, a painful one, but it's a story I feel I have to tell. Hello to everyone watching and listening right now. I see the comments rolling in, and it warms my heart to see so many of you here. It's about 2 p.m. here in Ohio on a crisp autumn afternoon. Please let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's a strange comfort knowing that while we're all in different places, maybe we can share a piece of this experience together. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to where the cracks first started to show. The worn leather of my steering wheel felt cool and familiar beneath my fingertips. For the third month in a row, I hadn't driven straight to the bank. My car was parked in the quiet lot of the local public library, a place of peace that felt jarringly at odds with the turmoil in my soul. I stared at the red brick building, at the families coming and going without really seeing them. Tucked inside my purse, nestled within a checkbook that felt heavier each month, was a check for $4,000. It was already made out to my only child, my daughter, Olivia. My hand had barely trembled as I'd written it that morning, the motion a deeply ingrained mechanical act, but my heart felt like a lead weight sinking low in my chest. This was the ritual. On the first business day of every month for 5 long years, I had dutifully transferred a significant portion of mine and my husband George's retirement savings to Olivia. It had all started with a phone call, as these life-altering things so often do. I can still hear her voice, thick with a panic that had twisted my own stomach into knots. She had been 6 months pregnant with Sophie, and she was sobbing, great gulping sounds that made it hard for her to speak. Ryan's much-anticipated promotion at his sales firm hadn't come with the salary increase they'd counted on, and the mortgage on their new house, a house in a trendy suburban neighborhood they'd stretched to afford, was, in her words, drowning them. "I don't know what to do, Mom," she had wailed, her voice cracking. "We're going to lose the house. The bank sent a letter. How can I bring a baby into this world if we don't even have a roof over our heads? I'm so scared." Every maternal instinct, every fiber of my being had screamed at me to fix it. My entire life had been dedicated to caring for others. I'd been a nurse for 40 years, a charge nurse on a busy surgical floor for the last 15 of my career. My job was to solve problems, to soothe pain, to create order out of chaos. George and I had been careful, diligent savers. We'd lived modestly, planned meticulously, and built a comfortable, if not extravagant, retirement fund. We had more than enough. "We'll help you, sweetie," I'd said, the words leaving my lips without a second's hesitation. "Don't you worry about a thing. We'll make sure you and the baby are safe and taken care of." The initial plan was for the support to be temporary, a few months, 6 at the most, just to get them over the hump and on their feet. But a few months had bled into a year. Then Sophie was born. A perfect, beautiful little girl who stole my heart from the very first moment I held her tiny, fragile body in my arms. The expenses, Olivia claimed, only grew. Daycare costs were astronomical. Sophie needed special organic formula. Ryan's salary was still stretched impossibly thin. The excuses shifted and evolved, but the need for the money remained a constant, unwavering demand. So, the ritual continued. But lately, something had changed within me. It wasn't a sudden shift, but a slow, creeping unease, like the insidious chill that seeps into your bones on a damp autumn day. It was a feeling I couldn't quite name, a jarring dissonance between Olivia's tearful words of struggle
and the life I was beginning to see with my own two eyes. With a heavy sigh, I finally put the car in drive and made the short trip to the bank. The teller, a young woman named Brenda, with a kind, open smile, greeted me by name. "The usual, Margaret?" she asked, her voice unfailingly cheerful. I nodded, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. I slid the check and the transfer slip under the thick protective glass. "The usual, Brenda." As she processed the transaction with brisk efficiency, my mind drifted. My life had become a second, unpaid career in service to my daughter's family. I spent at least 4 days a week at their house. George had started joking that I should be clocking in, and the joke held a bitter sting of truth. I'd arrive in the morning to find the remnants of last night's expensive-looking takeout containers on the counter and a sink overflowing with dishes. I would clean their kitchen, do their laundry, and prepare a healthy, home-cooked dinner for them before they even walked in the door. My main role, the one I truly cherish, was looking after my precious Sophie. I would take her to the park, read her stacks of stories, and build magnificent towers of colorful blocks just to watch her giggle with delight as she knocked them all down. But Olivia and Ryan were like ghosts in their own home. They'd arrive late, sighing with exhaustion, and immediately retreat to the blue glow of their phones or the drone of the television. Dinners were often silent, tense affairs, punctuated only by the clinking of forks and my gentle attempts to coax Sophie to eat her vegetables. The easy, loving connection I'd once shared with my daughter felt frayed and stretched thin like old, worn-out elastic. She was present in body, but her mind, her heart, seemed to be somewhere else entirely. "All set, Margaret." Brenda's voice pulled me back to the present. She pushed the receipt toward me. My account balance was now $4,000 later. The number stared back at me, a stark, black and white reminder of my sacrifice. Driving away from the bank, the unease returned, stronger this time. I decided to stop at the grocery store. Olivia had texted me earlier, a short, demanding list without any pretense of politeness. Need milk, organic eggs, kale, and that expensive artisanal bread Sophie likes. There was no please. There was no thank you. There rarely was anymore. As I walked the brightly lit aisles, I thought about the conversation I'd had with George the night before. He was a quiet man, a retired civil engineer, always more comfortable with numbers and blueprints than with messy human emotions. But he saw more than people ever gave him credit for. "Are you okay, Margie?" he asked, looking up from his newspaper, his brow furrowed with concern. I sighed, sinking into the familiar comfort of my armchair. "It's Olivia. I'm just so worried about her. This money, it feels like it's become a crutch. Or worse, an expectation." "It's a requirement," he stated, his voice flat and devoid of judgment, which only made it cut deeper. I defended her, of course, a reflex honed over years. "She's just stressed, George. It's hard for young families these days. The economy, the pressure." He just folded his paper deliberately and looked at me over the top of his reading glasses, his gaze steady and knowing. "Is it, or are we making it easy for them not to even try?" His question echoed in my mind as I stood at the checkout, paying for groceries that cost more than what I used to spend in a week for our own household. I was enabling this. My desperate desire to protect my daughter from hardship might be robbing her of the chance to build her own strength, her own life. The thought was terrifying. As I drove toward her neighborhood, a place of manicured lawns and houses that all looked a little too big for their lots, I made a silent resolution. I wouldn't confront her, not yet, but I would start paying closer attention. I would start looking for the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. The ritual of blind support was over. A new ritual, one of quiet, painful observation, was about to begin. The front door to Olivia's house was unlocked, a silent expectation of my arrival. I let myself in, balancing the heavy grocery bags as I pushed the door closed with my hip. The familiar scene of morning chaos greeted me, an assault on the senses. Sophie's brightly colored toys were scattered across the living room floor like the aftermath of a tiny, joyful hurricane. A pair of Ryan's expensive-looking leather sneakers were kicked off by the entryway, and the faint, sweet, cloying smell of stale coffee hung in the air. "Grandma!" A small whirlwind of blonde pigtails and pink unicorn pajamas came hurtling out of the family room. I dropped the bags with a thud and knelt, my arms open wide to catch my granddaughter. Sophie crashed into me with a happy shriek, her small arms wrapping tightly around my neck in a hug that felt like pure sunshine. For a moment, all the unease, all the worry, all the creeping dread melted away. This was why I did it. This little girl was the anchor of my universe. "Hello, my sweet pea," I murmured into her hair, which smelled faintly of strawberries and sleep. "Did you have a good breakfast this morning?" She pulled back, her blue eyes, so achingly like her mother's used to be, wide and serious. "Daddy gave me a Pop-Tart. He was in a hurry. Mommy was on the phone. She was talking to Grandma Vanessa about their trip." My heart gave a little squeeze, a nervous flutter. "A trip? How exciting! Where are they going?" "To the spa," Sophie said, drawing the word out with dramatic flair. "Mommy said she needs to recharge her batteries." "What are batteries, Grandma? Do I have them?" I forced a smile, ruffling her hair to hide the tremor in my hand. "It's just something grown-ups say when they're tired, honey. It means they need to rest." I steered her toward the kitchen. "Let's put these groceries away, and then you and I can build the tallest castle in the whole wide world." As I unpacked the organic kale that would likely wilt in the crisper and the artisanal bread that cost $9 a loaf, Sophie's innocent words replayed in my mind. A spa trip. That sounded expensive. It didn't quite fit the carefully constructed narrative of a family struggling to make ends meet. But I tried to push the thought away. "Don't jump to conclusions, Margaret," I told myself. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe Vanessa, who was married to a wealthy developer, was treating her. I had to be fair. Later that afternoon, while Sophie was blessedly down for her nap, I decided to tackle the mountain of laundry that had colonized a corner of their bedroom. As I was sorting the whites from the colors, my hand brushed against a crumpled piece of paper in the bottom of the hamper. I picked it out, intending to throw it away, but the bold red letters at the top caught my eye, screaming at me, "Credit card statement, past due." My hands went cold. It was addressed to Olivia, a thick, multi-page bill. I knew I shouldn't look. It was a profound invasion of her privacy. But George's words from the night before, combined with Sophie's chatter about a spa trip, created a knot of anxiety in my stomach so tight I could barely breathe. My fingers, acting of their own accord, carefully, guiltily, unfolded the paper. My eyes scanned the long list of charges, and my breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't the past due stamp that shocked me. It was the items themselves. There was a $600 charge from a high-end boutique called Chic & Co., another for $450 from a restaurant I knew was one of the most expensive and exclusive in the city. There were multiple charges for a gourmet meal delivery service that cost over $150 a week. And then, near the bottom of the second page, a charge that made my vision swim. $800 to Serenity Springs Spa and Resort. I sank down onto the laundry room floor, the crisp, clean scent of detergent filling my nostrils, a sickeningly ironic contrast to the dirty, ugly secret I held in my hand. It was all there, in black and white. The financial hardship was a lie. A carefully crafted performance, and I was the sole, unwitting audience member funding the entire production. I felt a wave of physical nausea. It wasn't just the money, as staggering as that was. It was the depth of the deception. For 5 years, I had pictured my daughter poring over bills at her kitchen table, her brow furrowed with worry. I had imagined her sacrificing her own wants for the needs of her family. I had imagined my $4,000 going toward the mortgage, towards Sophie's future college fund, towards easing a burden that was too heavy for her to carry alone. The reality was so much uglier. My money, my hard-earned retirement savings, was funding a lifestyle they couldn't afford but felt utterly entitled to. It was paying for designer clothes and fancy dinners, while I spent my days scrubbing their floors and raising their child. A cold, hard anger began to replace the nausea. It was an emotion I rarely felt, and its intensity was a shock to my system. I was a fool, a willing, gullible fool. I had allowed my unconditional love for my daughter to blind me to the person she had become. I carefully folded the statement and tucked it deep into my purse. This was evidence. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but my training as a nurse kicked in. Observe, document, assess before acting. When Sophie woke up, I pushed my turmoil deep down and pasted a happy smile on it for her. We played with her dolls, her innocent, nonsensical chatter, a temporary balm to my raw nerves. But as I was getting her an afternoon snack, she said something that sent another, even colder chill down my spine. She was holding a new doll I hadn't seen before. It was a beautiful, expensive-looking porcelain doll with intricate lace on its dress. "I wondered where you got this beautiful dolly, sweetie," I asked, my voice strained. "Grandma Vanessa gave it to me," she said brightly. "It was a present because Mommy gave her a pretty necklace." I froze, the apple slices I was cutting forgotten on the counter. My blood ran cold. "A necklace?" "Uh-huh," she nodded, her pigtails bouncing. "The one with the shiny pearls. Mommy said it was from her grandma, but she never wears it, so Grandma Vanessa should have it." The air left my lungs in a painful rush. She couldn't mean, she wouldn't. That necklace was my mother's. It was the only significant piece of her jewelry I had left after she passed away. It was an heirloom, a precious piece of our family's history, meant to be passed down through generations of women in our family. I had given it to Olivia on her wedding day, my own hands trembling as I fastened it around her neck, telling her it was for her to one day give to her own daughter. It wasn't just about its monetary value, it was about the legacy, the inheritance of love and memory it represented. And she had given it away to her mother-in-law, as if it were a trinket, a worthless bauble to be traded for favor. That was the moment the last vestiges of my denial, the last threads of the beautiful story I had told myself about my daughter, crumbled into dust. This wasn't just irresponsibility or entitlement. This was a profound and staggering lack of respect. A callous, cruel disregard for my feelings, for our family's history, for the very concept of sentimental value. She hadn't just given away a necklace, she had given away a piece of me, a piece of my mother. I stared out the kitchen window at the perfectly manicured lawn, but I wasn't seeing the green grass. I was seeing my mother's face, her eyes shining with love as she wore that necklace at my own wedding. I was seeing my younger self, carefully wrapping it in soft blue velvet to give to Olivia on her special day. I saw the unbroken line of women in my family, a chain of love and legacy. And I saw my own daughter deliberately, carelessly breaking that chain. The credit card bill was a betrayal of trust. The necklace was a betrayal of the soul. I knew then, with a certainty that chilled me to the very bone, that I was not just dealing with a spoiled, thoughtless daughter. I was dealing with a stranger. And I had to protect myself, and more importantly, I had to protect Sophie from her. The following Saturday was the night of Vanessa's 60th birthday party. Olivia had been chattering about it for weeks, a lavish, no-expense-spared affair to be held at the local country club. Under normal circumstances, I would have been an enthusiastic participant in the preparations, helping her choose an outfit, offering to babysit Sophie, perhaps even quietly contributing to the gift. Now the thought of attending, of having to smile and make small talk, filled me with a cold, sickening dread. But I knew I had to go. I had to see it for myself. I needed that final visual confirmation of the ugly truth. George, to whom I had confessed everything in a flood of late-night tears, was a bastion of quiet strength. His anger on my behalf was a palpable, protective force. He held my hand tightly, his knuckles pressing into mine, as we walked from the sprawling parking lot toward the grand, columned entrance of the club. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Margie?" he asked, his voice low and laced with concern. "I have to be," I said, my own voice steadier than I felt. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I need to see it with my own eyes. The party was ostentatious as I had imagined. A string quartet played Vivaldi in a gilded corner. Uniformed waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne and elaborate, unidentifiable hors d'oeuvres, and the room was filled with people dressed in expensive cocktail attire, their laughter sounding brittle and loud. Olivia and Ryan stood near the entrance with the guest of honor, Vanessa, greeting their friends. Olivia was wearing a slinky, emerald green dress that I recognized with a jolt from the credit card statement, the one from Chic & Co. for $600. She looked radiant, laughing and air-kissing acquaintances, the perfect picture of a woman without a single care in the world. Vanessa was the queen of the evening, draped in a glittering gold gown that shimmered under the crystal chandeliers. And there, resting against the tanned, crepey skin of her throat, lay my mother's pearl necklace. The sight of it, bold and undeniable, stole the breath from my lungs. It was like seeing a precious, irreplaceable family photograph being used as a coaster for a drink. The pearls, which had once rested against my mother's skin as she held me as a baby, which I had worn on my own wedding day, now looked garish and out of place, a stolen artifact worn as an accessory to a lie. George's hand tightened on mine, his grip almost painful. He saw it too. His jaw was set like granite, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Olivia spotted us and waved us over, her smile bright and brittle. "Mom, Dad, you made it! Isn't this a wonderful party? Vanessa has truly outdone herself." "It's quite something," I managed to say, my eyes unable to leave the necklace. It was a magnet for my pain. Vanessa turned to us, her smile not quite reaching her cold, calculating eyes. "Margaret, George, so glad you could come." She touched the pearls with a casual, proprietary gesture that made my stomach churn. "Olivia gave me the most divine gift, this gorgeous necklace. It's vintage, you know, so classic." I finally tore my gaze away from the pearls and met my daughter's eyes. I gave her one last chance, one final, silent opportunity to show a flicker of shame, of understanding, of regret. I raised an eyebrow slightly, a silent question passing between us. "How could you, after everything I told you it meant?" Olivia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something, annoyance, guilt, crossed her face, before it was quickly replaced by a mask of breezy, impenetrable indifference. "Oh, that old thing. It was just sitting in my jewelry box collecting dust. I knew Vanessa would actually appreciate it and wear it." The casual cruelty of her words, the utter contempt in them, hit me harder than a physical blow. That old thing. She had reduced a symbol of our family's love, our history, our very identity to clutter. It was George who spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the surrounding chatter like a shard of ice. That old thing, Olivia, was your grandmother's. It was meant to be passed down to Sophie one day. Olivia's face flushed with anger at being challenged, especially in front of her revered mother-in-law. "Oh, Dad, don't be so dramatic. It's just a necklace. Besides, what would a little girl do with it? It would just get lost or broken. Vanessa is enjoying it now." The pointed emphasis on the word now was a clear and deliberate message that the present wants of her mother-in-law were infinitely more important than the future legacy of her own daughter. I felt a profound tectonic shift inside me. It was the final, agonizing click of a heavy lock falling into place. The part of my heart that had held out a desperate, stubborn hope for my daughter, the part that had made excuses for her and clung to the memory of the sweet, loving girl she used to be, went cold and dark and silent. That girl was gone. In her place was this hard, selfish stranger who saw family heirlooms as currency and her own mother as nothing more than a bank. I turned away from them, physically unable to look at their smiling, treacherous faces any longer. "George," I said, my voice barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears, "I need some air, right now." He guided me through the French doors onto a wide stone terrace overlooking the darkened golf course. The cool night air did little to quell the fire raging in my chest. I leaned against the stone balustrade, my knuckles white as I gripped the cold, rough surface. "I'm sorry, Margie," he said, his voice a low rumble of anger beside me. "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said, shaking my head, my gaze fixed on the distant glittering lights of the city. "It's mine. I let this happen. I kept writing the checks, I kept cleaning her house, I kept pretending she was someone she's not." We stood in silence for a long time. The sounds of the party, the music, the shrill laughter, seemed to come from another world, a world I no longer belonged to. My own world had shrunk to this single, sharp point of pain and devastating clarity. "What are we going to do?" George finally asked, his voice gentle. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the cool air filling my lungs and steadying my resolve. I was not just a grieving mother. I was a grandmother with a child to protect. Sophie deserved better than this. She deserved a legacy of love and integrity, not one of selfishness and deceit. She deserved to have her college fund secured and protected, not squandered on spa treatments and designer dresses. "I am going to do what I should have done a long time ago," I said, turning to face my husband. My voice was no longer whispering. It was clear and strong, forged in the fire of my heartbreak. George looked at me, his eyes searching mine in the dim light, and for the first time that evening, he smiled. It was a small, grim smile, but it was filled with a fierce pride that gave me strength. "Good," he said, his voice resonating with conviction. "I'm with you, every single step of the way."
We left the party without saying goodbye to anyone. As we walked back to our car under the cold, indifferent stars, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The image of my mother's pearls on Vanessa's neck was burned into my memory. It would no longer be a symbol of my pain. It would be a symbol of my purpose. It would be the fuel for the fight to come. The week after the party was a blur of quiet, purposeful action. The grief was still there, a dull, constant ache behind my ribs, but it was now overlaid with a layer of cold, clear-eyed determination. My days at Olivia's house, which I continued to attend as if nothing had happened, took on a surreal new meaning. I was no longer just a caregiver. I was an investigator on a mission, a spy in the house of lies. Every dirty dish, every overflowing laundry basket, every dismissive comment was another piece of data, another entry in the mental ledger of their transgressions. The catalyst for my next discovery came, as these things often do, from a mundane chore. It was a Tuesday, and I was tackling the mountain of laundry that had accumulated in their master bedroom. Ryan traveled frequently for his sales job, and he had a habit of emptying his pockets onto the dresser before tossing his clothes in the hamper. As I was methodically checking the pockets of a suit jacket, my fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt, but it wasn't for a business lunch or office supplies. It was a bill from the Cypress Hotel, a boutique hotel downtown known for its romantic, upscale suites and its discretion. The date on the receipt was from a Thursday 2 weeks prior, a night Ryan had supposedly been at a sales conference in Cleveland. The charge was for one night, a premium suite, and $200 in room service, including a bottle of expensive champagne. I stood there, in the oppressive quiet of their bedroom, the receipt trembling in my hand. It was possible, of course, that his conference had been moved at the last minute. It was possible he had to stay in the city for some legitimate work-related reason. But my gut, honed by 40 years of nursing and dealing with every kind of person imaginable, told me a different, much uglier story. This, coupled with the extravagant spending and the general air of deceit, felt like another critical piece of a very sordid puzzle. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking slightly, and took a clear, steady photo of the receipt before carefully placing it back in the jacket pocket. I didn't want to alert him. Not yet. Knowledge was power, but premature knowledge was dangerous. Later that afternoon, as I was preparing a snack for Sophie, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Can you pick up my dry cleaning? Thanks." No please, no question mark. A command disguised as a request. My fingers hovered over the screen. The old me would have replied, "Of course, sweetie," without a second thought. The new me typed back a simple, neutral, "No, I can't today." A few seconds later, my phone rang. It was Olivia. I stared at her picture on the screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't ready for a confrontation. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail notification. A strange, morbid curiosity, a need to know exactly what I was up against, made me listen. But it wasn't Olivia's voice I heard first. It was a pocket dial. I could hear the muffled sounds of a bustling coffee shop, the hiss of a milk steamer, and then Olivia's voice, clear as day, dripping with derision. "I know, right?" she was saying, followed by a short, sharp laugh. She actually said no. Can you believe the nerve? I think she's finally getting the hint that her free ride is over. There was a pause, and then another woman's voice, syrupy and sickeningly familiar. It was Vanessa. "Don't you worry, sweetie. You just have to manage her, keep her feeling needed, throw her a compliment every now and then. As long as that $4,000 keeps rolling in every month, we can put up with her little moods." Olivia laughed again, a sound that was now utterly devoid of warmth or humor. "Oh, I know. It's just so annoying. Anyway, the money for your new handbag cleared this morning. Did you go pick it up yet?" "I'm on my way there now," chirped Vanessa, her voice giddy. "Thanks to your mother's generous pension contribution. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without her." The call ended. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the phone pressed hard against my ear, listening to the dial tone. A free ride. My free ride was over? I was the one providing them with a live-in nanny, a housekeeper, a personal chef, and a laundress, all while funding their secret luxuries. And they had the audacity, the sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy, to see me as the freeloader? The pain, the anger, the sadness, it all coalesced into a single, blinding flash of white-hot rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash every plate in that perfectly appointed kitchen. I wanted to call my daughter and unleash a torrent of fury that would scorch the earth beneath her feet. But I didn't. My training, my discipline, my lifetime of keeping a cool head in a crisis took over. Rage was a fire that would consume me and leave me with nothing but ashes. I needed something colder,
sharper, more enduring. I needed justice. I saved voicemail. It was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. The credit card bill showed their spending, the necklace showed their disrespect, the hotel receipt suggested infidelity. But this voicemail, this was the smoking gun. It laid their motives bare, their own voices dripping with contempt and conspiracy. I looked at the picture of the hotel receipt on my phone. My suspicion about Ryan was no longer just a gut feeling. If they were capable of this level of deception toward me, what other lies were they telling each other? An unfaithful husband, a mother who was being systematically drained of her life savings, a child being raised in a house built on secrets. This was not a safe or healthy environment for Sophie. My mission was no longer just about getting my money back and my dignity back. It was about protecting my granddaughter. I took a deep, shuddering breath and squared my shoulders. The time for quiet observation was over. The time for passive-aggressive texts and silent suffering was done. It was time to go on the offensive. It was time to call a lawyer. The next morning, I didn't go to Olivia's house. I sent her a brief, neutral text message that I had composed and recomposed a dozen times. I won't be able to come over for a while. There are some urgent family matters I need to attend to. The ambiguity was intentional, a small, calculated move at a and it was only just beginning to learn. Let her worry. Let her wonder. For the first time in 5 years, I was putting my own needs, my own sanity, first. My first call was to a man named Arthur Davies. He was a highly respected lawyer in our community, but I hadn't met him through any legal troubles. I knew him from the board of a local children's charity where I had volunteered for years after my retirement. He had always struck me as sharp, compassionate, and utterly no-nonsense. He wasn't just a slick talker in an expensive suit. He genuinely cared about doing the right thing. He was exactly the kind of ally I needed. His secretary was surprised to hear from me, but sensing the urgency in my voice, put me through to him immediately. Margaret, Arthur's voice was warm and familiar. It's been too long. I hope everything is all right. I'm afraid it's not, Arthur, I said, my voice low and steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me. I have a rather delicate family situation. I need some advice, and I was hoping to retain your services. I trust your discretion implicitly. Of course, he said, his tone shifting instantly to one of professional concern. My door is always open for you. Can you come in this afternoon? Say 2 p.m.? Walking into his wood-paneled office felt like crossing a threshold into another world. On one side was the messy, emotional chaos of my family life. On this side was order, logic, and the cool, clear rule of law. The scent of old books and lemon polish was calming to my frayed nerves.
I sat in a plush leather chair opposite his large mahogany desk, and for the next hour, I laid out the entire sordid story. I was methodical, presenting the events chronologically, just as I would have charted a patient's steady decline. I started with the monthly payments, the carefully woven narrative of their financial distress. I told him about the credit card statement I'd found, the spa trips, the designer clothes. I described the scene at Vanessa's birthday party, the painful saga of my mother's pearl necklace, my voice catching only once as I spoke of it. I showed him the photo of the hotel receipt from Ryan's pocket. Finally, with a deep breath, I took out my phone and placed it on the polished surface of his desk. And this, I said, is a voicemail I received yesterday. I believe it was what they call a pocket dial. I pressed play. The stately office was silent, except for the sound of my daughter's and her mother-in-law's voices, dripping with condescension and greed, filling the space between us. When it was over, Arthur leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. He was quiet for a long, unnerving moment, his expression unreadable. I felt a flicker of doubt, a familiar pang of insecurity. Had I overreacted?
Was this just a messy, unpleasant family squabble, not a genuine legal issue? Then he leaned forward, his eyes sharp and focused, and the doubt vanished. "Margaret," he said, his voice firm and resonant, "this is not just a messy family squabble. This is a systematic case of financial exploitation. What they are doing, by manipulating your love and sense of duty for financial gain, likely constitutes a form of elder abuse, specifically undue influence and financial fraud." The words hung in the air, clinical, legal, and shocking. Elder abuse. I had never thought of it in those terms. I was the caregiver, the strong one. But he was right. They had preyed on my emotions, my love for my daughter and granddaughter, and used it as a weapon against me. "The voicemail is damning," he continued, his legal mind clearly at work. "It clearly establishes intent to deceive. The credit card statements corroborate their extravagant spending. The necklace, while emotionally devastating, is legally more complex, as it was technically a gift. But it establishes a clear pattern of profound disrespect and disregard for your family's assets and history." He paused, his gaze falling to the photo of the hotel receipt on my phone. "This, however, opens up another, more serious front. You said you're at their house 4 to 5 days a week, essentially acting as their full-time, unpaid nanny and housekeeper, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed. "And you do this for free, while also giving them $48,000 a year?" "Yes." He shook his head slowly, a look of grim disbelief on his face. "If your son-in-law is indeed being unfaithful, it speaks volumes about the overall stability and moral character of the household. In a potential custody dispute, that is highly relevant information. The primary concern of the court is always the well-being of the child. A home built on such deep-seated deception, financial instability, and infidelity is not a healthy environment for a 5-year-old girl." Hearing him say it out loud, so plainly and professionally, solidified the conviction that had been forming in my heart. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Sophie. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Arthur's demeanor became crisp, all business. "We go on the offensive, Margaret, but we do it quietly and strategically. First, you are going to become the most devoted, helpful mother and grandmother they have ever seen. You will go back to their house. You will not mention the money, the necklace, or anything you have discovered. You will smile. You will clean. You will play with Sophie. You will be utterly and completely above reproach. Do you understand?" I nodded, my mind racing to keep up. "Your role," he continued, "is to be our eyes and ears. I want you to keep a detailed journal. Note every time they leave Sophie with you for extended periods, every time they speak to you with disrespect, every new luxury item that appears in the house. Your detailed, contemporaneous observations will become our ammunition." "And your role?" I asked. "My role is to build the legal fortress around you. First, I'm going to hire a private investigator, a good one, a man I trust. We need to confirm what Ryan is doing at the Cypress Hotel. We need irrefutable photographic proof of his infidelity. Second, I will begin drafting the necessary legal documents. We will prepare a petition for temporary emergency custody of your granddaughter, citing an unstable and potentially harmful home environment. We will also draft a cease and desist letter regarding any future financial demands and a formal demand for a full accounting of the money you have provided them for the past 5 years." He leaned forward, his gaze intense and serious. "This is not going to be easy, Margaret. It will require you to play a part. It will be emotionally draining. But if we do this right, we will not just stop the bleeding. We will ensure Sophie's safety and secure your financial future. We will present them with 2 options. cooperate with our terms completely, or face total and utter annihilation in court and in their personal lives. Are you prepared for that? I thought of Sophie's innocent, trusting face. I thought of my mother's pearls, desecrated. I thought of the cold, dismissive tone in my own daughter's voice as she called me a freeloader. Yes, I said. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of power, cold and clear, course through my veins. I was no longer a victim. I was a client, and I was preparing for war. Returning to Olivia's house the next day was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to turn the car around, to drive away and never look back, to sever all ties and let the pieces of our shattered family lie where they fell. The thought of facing my daughter, of smiling and pretending everything was normal, felt like a betrayal of my own soul. But Arthur's words echoed in my mind, a mantra of resolve. You will be above reproach. I was an actress now, and this was the most important role of my life. I let myself in with my key, calling out a cheerful, "Hello, I'm here," that sounded foreign and brittle in my own ears. Olivia came out of the kitchen, a half-eaten piece of toast in her hand, a surprised, slightly suspicious look on her face. "Oh, Mom, I thought you had family matters to attend to." "All sorted out," I said breezily, forcing myself to walk over and give her a quick, one-armed hug. It felt like embracing a marble statue. "Just a bit of boring paperwork for your father and me. Wills and things, nothing to worry about." I forced a bright smile. "Is Sophie ready for our trip to the park?" The change in my demeanor, the sheer normality of it, seemed to disarm her. The suspicion in her eyes was replaced by a visible wave of relief. Her reliable, unpaid nanny was back on duty. The status quo, the comfortable arrangement she had taken for granted, was restored. Or so she thought. The weeks that followed were a masterclass of duplicity, a tightrope walk over a chasm of my own suppressed emotions. On the surface, I was the perfect doting grandmother. I baked oatmeal cookies with Sophie, her little hands covered in flour. I organized Olivia's chaotic pantry into a model of efficiency. I even managed to compliment a new, ridiculously expensive floor lamp that appeared in the living room one day, asking where she found such a unique piece. But beneath the surface, I was a spy, a silent archivist of their sins. My phone became my most important tool. Following Arthur's advice, I started a new, password-protected note, a secret journal of their casual cruelty and breathtaking entitlement. October 12th. Olivia and Ryan left for a dinner meeting at 6 p.m. They returned at 11:30 p.m. Sophie was upset they didn't come in to tuck her in. I found a receipt from the Gilded Lily restaurant in Olivia's purse while tidying. The bill was for $380, including 2 $100 bottles of wine.
October 15th. Vanessa came over for coffee. She spent 20 minutes complaining about the salary she had to pay her new cleaning lady. She was wearing a new pair of designer shoes. Later, I overheard her on the phone with Olivia in the hallway, referring to me as the cash machine. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the plate I was washing. October 18th. Ryan came home late, smelling of a cloying, sweet perfume, not Olivia's. He claimed he had to work late with his team to finish a big proposal. He was agitated and defensive when I asked if he wanted me to warm up his dinner. And then there were the more strategic, more difficult moves. Arthur had explained that in our state, it was legal to record conversations in your own home or in a public space, but placing a listening device in someone else's home was a legal gray area we couldn't afford to enter. However, a nanny cam, ostensibly for the child's safety, was perfectly acceptable and often encouraged. With a shaking hand and a heart full of guilt, I ordered a small, innocuous-looking camera disguised as a digital clock. I placed it on the mantelpiece in the family room, a public space where Sophie spent most of her time. I told Olivia it was so I could keep an eye on Sophie from the kitchen while I was cooking. She'd barely glanced at it, her attention already captured by a notification on her phone. "Whatever, Mom. Good idea," she'd mumbled. The footage it captured was both heartbreaking and infuriating. It showed long, lonely stretches of Sophie playing by herself, trying to engage her parents who were perpetually glued to their screens. It recorded them bickering over money, not a lack of it, but how to spend my money. "Should I get the blue handbag or the red one?" Olivia whined in one particularly galling clip. "I can't decide. They're both so perfect." "Get both," Ryan had replied, his eyes never leaving his laptop. "Just use your mom's money. That's what it's for." Each clip, each journal entry was another brick in the wall of evidence Arthur was meticulously building. He called me once a week with updates. The private investigator, a gruff but efficient former cop named Frank, was making significant progress. "He's got a routine," Arthur told me over the phone, his voice grim. "Every other Thursday, like clockwork, Ryan checks in to the Cypress Hotel. Same suite, number 714. He's not alone. The woman's name is Tiffany. She's a junior associate at his company. It seems your son-in-law is gunning for a promotion in more ways than one." The news, while expected, still felt like a punch to the gut. Not for my own sake, but for Olivia's. As much as she had hurt me, as much as she had betrayed my trust, she was still my daughter. The thought of her being cheated on, her marriage a complete sham, filled me with a complex, warring mix of anger and pity. But the pity was quickly extinguished by the memory of her voice on that voicemail. She was a willing participant in this charade of a life. She and Ryan were two sides of the same counterfeit coin. The hardest part of this entire charade was maintaining the facade with Sophie. The child was incredibly perceptive. She could feel the tension in the house, even if she couldn't understand its source. "Why are you sad, Grandma?" she asked me one afternoon as we were sitting on the floor coloring. I looked up, startled. I thought I had been hiding it so well. "I'm not sad, Sweet Pea. I'm just thinking about what to make for dinner." "You look sad," she insisted, her little brow furrowed with a worry that no 6-year-old should carry. "Like when Mommy and Daddy are fighting with their quiet voices." Her words were a dagger to my heart. Fighting with their quiet voices? She knew. She was living in the crossfire of their silent, toxic war. My resolve hardened into steel. I was doing the right thing. This covert campaign, this painful, soul-crushing deception was all for her. I was her only way out. The weeks turned into a month, then 2. The evidence mounted into an undeniable mountain. Frank, the PI, had delivered a thick manila envelope to Arthur's office filled with damning photos and detailed reports of Ryan's affair. The nanny cam had captured dozens of hours of casual neglect. My journal was filled with dated, specific accounts of their lies, their extravagance, and their contempt. We had everything we needed. Arthur and I met in his office to review the final plan. He had everything prepared: the custody petition, the financial restraining orders, the letters to be sent to Ryan's HR department. It was a comprehensive, multi-pronged attack designed for maximum, devastating impact. "The final piece of the puzzle, Margaret, is the trigger," Arthur said, looking at me intently from across his desk. "We need them to make one final, undeniable move that pushes you over the edge. It will strengthen our case immeasurably if we can show the court that you acted only after being subjected to a direct and unreasonable demand." I knew what he meant. We needed to bait the trap. We needed them to give us the gun to hold to their own heads. "I know how to do it," I said, a grim certainty settling over me like a shroud. "All I have to do is say no." The opportunity came sooner than I expected. It was a cold, gray Tuesday in early November. The holidays were approaching, a time that usually filled me with the warmth of family and anticipation. But this year, it only brought the sense of impending doom, of a storm about to break. I was at my own home, enjoying a rare, quiet afternoon with George, attempting to lose myself in a novel, when my phone rang, its cheerful tone jarring in the silence.
The screen flashed with Olivia's picture. I looked at George, my heart starting to pound a familiar nervous rhythm against my ribs. He saw the look on my face and gave me a short, firm nod. It's time. I took a deep, fortifying breath and answered, schooling my voice into a tone of deliberate lightness. "Hi, sweetie," I said. "Mom?" Olivia's voice was rushed, clipped, devoid of any pleasantries. "I need you to do something for me. It's important." I could hear the familiar tone of ingrained entitlement, the absolute assumption of my immediate compliance. "What is it, Olivia?" I asked, keeping my own voice even. "We've decided to redo the backyard. It's a mess. We want to put in a new stone patio, a fire pit, the works. Make it nice for Sophie. The contractor gave us a great quote, but we need to put down a deposit to lock in the price before the spring rush." I stayed silent, letting her talk, letting her spin her web of flimsy lies. I knew this wasn't about a patio. This was about a winter vacation to some sun-drenched island or a down payment on a new luxury SUV. The lie was so blatant, so lazy, it was almost insulting. "Anyway," she continued, a slight edge of impatience creeping into her voice at my silence, "the deposit is $15,000. I need you to transfer it to my account by tomorrow morning at the latest." $15,000. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was more than 3 times our monthly allowance. It was a significant chunk of the retirement savings I was supposed to be living on for the rest of my life. This was it. This was the trigger Arthur had been waiting for, the final outrageous overreach. I took a moment, deliberately letting the silence stretch, forcing her to wait. I could hear her impatient breathing on the other end of the line. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a thunderclap in the space between us. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with shock and disbelief. "What?" Olivia finally sputtered, as if she couldn't have possibly heard me correctly. "What did you just say?" "I said no, Olivia," I repeated, this time colder, harder, each syllable a chip of ice. "I will not be giving you $15,000. You can't say no," she stammered, her voice rising in pitch, cracking with indignation. "This is for the house, for Sophie. It's an investment in our family's future. It increases the property value."
"Is it, Olivia?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like a guillotine. "Is it really for a patio, or is it for something else?" Her stunned silence was all the answer I needed. She was so used to my passivity, my endless compliance, that she was completely unprepared for any kind of resistance. Her shock quickly curdled into a vicious, ugly rage. "I cannot believe you," she shrieked, her voice turning shrill. "After everything I do for you, I let you come into my home. I let you see your granddaughter. What more do you want from me?" "What I do for you?" The delusion was so complete, so profoundly narcissistic, it would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" she continued, her words tumbling out in a torrent of long simmering venom. "Coming over here with your sad little casseroles, judging me, acting like you're some kind of saint. You're just a lonely old woman with nothing better to do than meddle in my life. You're living off our success, enjoying our beautiful home." The line went quiet for a second, a breath before the final plunge. And then she delivered the fatal blow, the words that would sever the last thread of connection between us. "You know what, Mom? You are a useless, selfish burden. And if you can't do this one simple thing for your own family, then you are nothing to me." I didn't say a word. I just listened. I listened as the poison she had been harboring for years finally spilled out. I listened to the daughter I had raised, the child I had loved more than life itself, tell me I was nothing. And in that moment, I felt calm. There was no pain. There was no fresh wave of anger. There was only a vast, empty stillness.
the last stubborn ember of maternal love I had held for her, the hope that the girl I knew was still in there somewhere, had been decisively, brutally extinguished. She had done it herself. She was still ranting, her voice a grating, meaningless noise in my ear, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was looking at George, who had been listening to the whole ugly exchange on speakerphone. His face was a mask of cold, quiet fury. Quietly, calmly, I pressed the end call button, cutting her off mid-tirade. The silence in our living room was absolute, profound. "Well," George said, his voice dangerously low, "I believe that's what your lawyer would call the trigger." I nodded slowly, my eyes feeling very clear. "That's the one." I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the gray, unforgiving November sky. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean. The emotional turmoil of the past few months had vanished, replaced by a singular, unwavering purpose. She had called me a useless burden. She had said I was nothing to her. Fine. I would show her what nothing looked like. I turned back from the window, my gaze meeting my husband's. "Call Arthur," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the winter ground. "Tell him it's time. Tell him to set the meeting. The war starts now." The phone calls I made were brief and surgically precise. I called Olivia first, my thumb steady on the screen. "I need you, Ryan, and your mother-in-law to be at my house this Saturday at 2 p.m. sharp." My voice was devoid of all emotion, a flat, cold instrument of my will. "I have nothing to say to you," she spat back, her voice still thick with the previous day's rage. "This is not a request, Olivia," I replied, my tone leaving no room for argument. "If you are not here, the conversation will happen through my lawyer instead. I assure you, you will prefer to have it in person. Be here." I hung up before she could form another syllable. I called Vanessa next. Her tone was frosty, superior. "What is this about, Margaret? I'm very busy." "It concerns your financial arrangements with my daughter," I said simply. "Saturday, 2 p.m. Don't be late." The satisfying click of the phone ending the call was the first note in my symphony of retribution. They arrived not together, but one by one, like defendants being called to a trial they didn't know they were attending. Olivia came first, storming up the walkway, her face a thunderous mask of resentment. Ryan followed a few minutes later, looking wary and annoyed, clearly dragged here against his will. Vanessa was the last, sweeping in as if she owned the place, a condescending smirk playing on her lips. They found me sitting in my favorite armchair in the living room. To my right sat George, his presence a silent, solid wall of paternal fury. To my left, in another armchair, sat Arthur Davies, looking calm and impeccably professional in a dark suit, a polished leather briefcase resting at his feet. The sight of him, a stranger in a suit in the heart of our family home, threw them completely. Their smirks and scowls faltered, replaced by confusion and a dawning flicker of alarm. "What is he doing here?" Olivia demanded, pointing an accusatory finger at Arthur. "Mr. Davies is my legal counsel," I said calmly. "Please, sit down, all of you." They hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, then reluctantly sat on the sofa opposite us, a united front of defiance that already seemed to be crumbling. Olivia, ever the drama queen, decided to open the proceedings with a performance of magnanimity. "Look, Mom, if this is about the other day I was upset, I may have said some things I didn't mean." I held up a hand, a simple gesture that silenced her instantly. "We are well past that, Olivia. Please, let's dispense with the theatrics." My voice was quiet, but it commanded the room with an authority they had never heard from me before. "We're here today to discuss the truth." I nodded to Arthur. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek, silver tablet. With a tap of his finger, the sound of Olivia's voice filled the room, amplified by a small, powerful Bluetooth speaker he placed on the coffee table.
As long as that $4,000 keeps rolling in every month, we can put up with her little moods. Vanessa's voice followed, dripping with contempt. Thanks to your mother's generous contribution. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without her. The color drained from Olivia and Vanessa's faces. They stared at the speaker as if it were a venomous snake that had just spat in their faces. Ryan looked back and forth between them, a confused, angry expression dawning on his. That's taken out of context, Olivia stammered, her voice high and thin. Is it? I asked softly. I nodded to Arthur again. He swiped the screen, and a photo appeared, a high-resolution image of my mother's pearl necklace resting on Vanessa's throat at the birthday party. Then he swiped again, displaying copies of Olivia's credit card statements on the screen, with the lavish, unaffordable purchases circled in glaring red. Vanessa let out a small, strangled gasp, her hand flying instinctively to her throat, which was now bare.
The room fell into a dead, suffocating silence, broken only by Olivia's choked, gulping sobs. The defiant, arrogant trio that had walked into my home 30 minutes ago was gone. In their place were 3 shattered, exposed, and utterly defeated people. I let the silence hang for a long moment, allowing the full, crushing weight of their disgrace to settle upon them. Then I spoke. I have 2 options for you today, I said, my voice resonating with the authority I had earned through months of pain and planning. You will listen to them very carefully. I leaned forward, my eyes meeting each of theirs in turn, pinning them in their seats. Option 1, Olivia and Ryan, you will sign a temporary, legally binding agreement granting George and me full physical and legal custody of Sophie, effective immediately. The reason cited will be an unstable home environment requiring immediate intervention. You will both enroll in and attend mandatory family and individual counseling with a court-approved therapist. Vanessa, you will have no contact with me or Sophie indefinitely. In return for your complete and immediate cooperation, all of this evidence, I gestured to the tablet and the damning envelope, will remain in Mr. Davies' safe. It will not be sent to the police, to Ryan's Human Resources Department, or to a divorce attorney. I paused, letting the offer sink in. It was a lifeline, a chance to avoid total, public, irreversible ruin. Option 2, I continued, my voice dropping to an icy, menacing whisper. You refuse, and I will unleash hell. Mr. Davies will immediately file the emergency custody petition with the court, using every single piece of this evidence. He will simultaneously file a police report for financial elder abuse. He will send a copy of this envelope to the CEO of your company, Ryan, along with a letter detailing your use of company time and resources for your affair. I will sue you for every penny I have given you over the past 5 years, plus damages. I will ensure with every fiber of my being that you lose your daughter, your job, your reputation, and any shred of dignity you have left. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly in the silent room. The power in the room had shifted so completely it was a physical force. I was no longer the victim. I was no longer the lonely old woman or the cash machine. I was the matriarch. I was the judge, and I had just passed sentence. The 24 hours that followed were the longest and quietest of my life. I didn't hear from them directly. The silence from their side was absolute, a terrifying void filled with my own anxious, second-guessing thoughts. Had I pushed too hard? Was my ultimatum too severe? Would their pride and arrogance cause them to call my bluff, forcing this into a messy, public battle that would inevitably hurt Sophie the most, no matter who won? George was my rock, his calm, steady presence a constant reassurance.
but even he seemed to be holding his breath. The tension in our quiet home was almost unbearable. The call came at 1:45 p.m. the next day, 15 minutes before the deadline I had imposed was set to expire. It was from a panicked, tearful Olivia, not to me, but to Arthur Davies. He called me moments later. They had accepted. They would sign everything. There was no fight left in them.
A year can change everything. It can feel like a lifetime, or the blink of an eye. 12 months after that fateful, terrible day in Arthur's office, our lives had found a new, peaceful rhythm. Our house was no longer just a house. It was a home again, filled with the vibrant, chaotic, wonderful energy of a happy 6-year-old. Sophie was thriving. She was at the top of her kindergarten class, a little sponge for knowledge. She'd made a gaggle of new friends, and the quiet, anxious little girl I had brought home with me was now a confident, chatty, and incredibly loving child. I had found a new purpose, too. My life was no longer defined by my service to Olivia or my grief over the daughter I had lost. I had enrolled in a pottery class at the local community center, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. My hands, which had spent decades caring for others, were now learning to create something messy and beautiful just for me. George and I started traveling again, taking short weekend trips to nearby state parks and small towns, rediscovering the easy, comfortable companionship that had been the foundation of our marriage for over 40 years. We were not just grandparents. We were Margaret and George again. The news from Olivia and Ryan's shattered world trickled in through Arthur, who managed all communication. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. As predicted, once the undeniable truth of his affair was laid bare, there was no saving the marriage. Ryan's company, a conservative financial firm that valued its public image above all else, had let him go after an anonymous tip to the HR department detailed his conduct. His career was in shambles. Without my money to cushion him, and with a drastically diminished salary from a new, lower-level job, he was living in a small, sad-looking apartment across town. Vanessa had faded into obscurity. Her glittering social circle, built on a fragile foundation of wealth and status, had abandoned her once the story of her role in the financial exploitation became whispered gossip at the country club. She had sold her large house and moved into a condo. Her days of spa treatments and designer bags apparently over. Olivia's journey was the most complex and, in a way, the most painful to watch from a distance. Forced to stand on her own 2 feet for the first time in her adult life, she had struggled immensely. She had lost the house, the car, the lifestyle she felt she was owed. She worked 2 part-time jobs, one in retail and one as a waitress, to make ends meet. According to her therapist's reports, which were shared with Arthur as part of the custody agreement, the complete collapse of her world had forced a brutal but necessary self-examination. She was beginning, slowly and painfully, to understand the depth of her entitlement and the devastating consequences of her actions. She saw Sophie every other weekend, supervised visits that were initially awkward and strained, but were slowly becoming more genuine. She was trying. For the first time, she was actually trying. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was out in the garden with Sophie, teaching her how to rake the fallen leaves into a big, satisfying pile for jumping in. The mail carrier came by on his usual route and handed me a small stack of letters. Tucked between a utility bill and a catalog was a simple, cream-colored envelope. The handwriting on the front, elegant and familiar, was my daughter's. My heart did a familiar little flip, a mixture of dread and a hope I couldn't quite extinguish. It was the first time she had tried to contact me directly, outside of the official, supervised channels, in a year. I tucked it into the pocket of my gardening apron, waiting until Sophie was bathed, read to, and sound asleep in her bed before I allowed myself to open it. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one I had sat on Judgment Day, and carefully slit the envelope open with a letter opener. Inside was a single sheet of matching stationery. The note was short, the handwriting a little shaky, as if written and rewritten many times. It didn't make excuses. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't ask for money. It simply said, "Mom, I was sitting in my apartment last night eating a grilled cheese sandwich for dinner, and I was happy. I paid for the bread and the cheese myself. It was the best meal I've ever had in years. I finally understand what you tried to give me and what I threw away. Thank you for not letting me destroy my life completely. Thank you for saving Sophie from me. I hope one day I can earn the right to be her mother again. I hope one day I can earn the right to be your daughter again. Olivia." A single tear traced a slow path down my cheek as I read the words. It wasn't a tear of sadness or of anger. It was a tear of catharsis, a release of the last bit of pain I had been holding on to so tightly.
The letter wasn't a solution, it wasn't a magic wand, but it was a start. It was the first honest thing she had said to me in a decade. I folded the letter and placed it on the small table beside me. I wouldn't be replying. Not yet. Her words were a promising first step, but the road to rebuilding trust is a long and arduous one, paved with consistent, selfless action, not just a single heartfelt note. Forgiveness, I now understood, couldn't be granted on demand. It had to be earned over time. My gaze drifted to the mantelpiece, where a new photograph sat in a simple silver frame. It was of me, George, and a beaming gap-toothed Sophie, taken on our summer vacation to the lake. My family. My true family. My journey had been born of the deepest betrayal imaginable, but it had led me here, to this place of quiet peace and profound strength. I had learned that true love isn't about endless blind sacrifice. It's about having the courage to enforce boundaries. It's about teaching others how to treat you by refusing to accept anything less than the respect you deserve. I had lost the daughter I thought I had, but in doing so, I had saved my granddaughter, and I had found myself again, and that was a victory worth any price.